All things must end, but endings are always bringing new beginnings. And as the year 2024 comes to a close, many of us become thoughtful and introspective about their life and their year. And in my case, this introspection has allowed me to think on the many changes that I've personally made, as well as ones that I've gone through as a dungeon master and the dungeon master that I'm morphing into. So today, I'd like to share some of the most important lessons that I've learned as a dungeon master over this last year, and hopefully some of these lessons can also help you too. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. If you're listening to this show, you've tried not being a dungeon master. You've tried to stop DMing and you've tried to be a player for a while, or maybe you've tried to walk away from the hobby. But for whatever reason, you just can't not be the DM. Other people stop showing up, you feel the urge to write and run the story, or it's just in your blood. Whatever it is, you can't not be the DM. And because of you, we made this show to help with your affliction as the dungeon master. I'm your host, Justin Lewis, and I'm just like you. I tried not being the DM, but I feel like I can't not do it, right? I would probably end up doing it in one shape or another, no matter what. And I'm also very happy to be chatting with you today, of all days, because as of the release of this episode, I'm very fortunate to be guesting on a couple panels. This is releasing on December 6th, and in Salt Lake City, Utah, at Dragonsteel Nexus, which is the Dragonsteel Publishing Convention. It's Brandon Sanderson's publishing company. I'm lucky enough to be guesting on two separate panels at that convention. And so if you're listening to this before then, give me your thoughts, prayers, well wishes, all of that. And if you're listening to this afterwards, well, hopefully you'll be able to listen to it because I'm hopefully going to be able to record it and release it on the show later on. So stay tuned for that. Also, if you're in town near Salt Lake City and you're looking for something fun to do, you should definitely check out Dragonsteel Nexus. It's going through December 5th, 6th, and 7th. So as the releasing of this episode, the 6th and 7th are really the only days available to you. It's awesome, so you should check it out. And if you're there, come say hi to me if you can find me. And, we'll talk and get to know each other. Speaking of panels, let me just also say that this was the first year where any of us here at Session Zero Studios or How to Be a Better DM were able to guest on panels. The first happened earlier this year at Dead Wars in Provo, Utah, which is also very cool. If you get a chance this next year to come see it, you should. And because of these experiences, our whole team has evolved a lot. And actually, before I get to the lessons that I've learned, I got to tell you guys something. And I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable in today's episode. I'm a sham. And I'm not saying that for sympathy or anything. I just want to be real, be vulnerable. And also, I'm guessing that a lot of you feel this same way too. But I, on most days, feel like a big fat phony. And it's mostly because I kind of consider myself to be a pretty average dungeon master, pretty mediocre. Looking back over my DMing career, I see a huge gap where I am and where I want to be, and it's really humbling. Over this last year, I've gotten so much better, but that improvement has really only made me more aware of how much farther there is to go before I'm where I want to be. When I first started How to Be a Better DM, I started it for a few reasons. First of all, I love the medium. I love podcasts. I love podcasting. And actually back in 2016, 2017, I'm pretty sure that I was telling people that my hobbies were podcasts, just listening to podcasts, right? That's what I did for fun. I loved podcasts. And I really love the medium. I love being able to say something. And I think all of us have something to say. And maybe podcasting is just my way of saying something. Secondly, and this is something that most of you actually might not be aware of, but I had a previous podcast. And that turned out to be less than successful in my view. See, I want to do podcasting and do this full time, and my previous podcast wasn't really going anywhere. It was a personal development podcast about doing hard things to make your life better. I actually called it the Hard Thing Podcast. Yeah, I know. Not the greatest name, and I definitely had to explain it to a lot of people and grin and bear it, as a lot of people sort of laughed at the name and kind of made fun of me. But towards the end, I actually ended up rebranding the name and turned it to Becoming the Hero, which is actually still live out in the web. You can still listen to it. I stopped doing that podcast because I tried putting together this summit, this online summit of previous podcast guests, which included a couple Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, a CIA spy. It was supposed to be really awesome. And it was an online summit. And I even tried to put some sort of small advertising budget to it. Previous to that, I was just doing everything kind of bootstrapping it. I didn't get a single sign up, even when I dropped the price to free. And I felt like that was kind of the nail in the coffin for me. I realized that, or at least I felt that I didn't have any authority in that space. I didn't think anyone would want to listen to me. And eventually I just stopped putting podcasts out. I stopped putting out episodes because I felt like the target market was too broad and that I couldn't compete. And when I stopped putting out podcasts, no one reached out asking where the show had gone. So I knew it was the right direction. In contrast, at the time, I saw Dungeons & Dragons as a great market to get into. I'm a marketer. That's what I do for my day job. And I love the game. And so to me, it was kind of this really nice cross-section. And I actually did feel like I had something to contribute to the hobby. I felt like the audience was much more specific and that maybe my content would resonate more. So I started doing some tests, just putting out some podcasts. I do SEO, so I was using some SEO tactics to brainstorm content ideas. And right off the bat, it seemed much more successful than the previous podcasts I was doing. And honestly, that is in no small part thanks to you, my listener, my friend. And we've come a long way since then, to be sure. And just like DMing, the farther we come, the more I realize that we need to get so much better and do so much more and put out so much better content for you. And it's humbling to realize that, yeah, we've come this, a long way, but wow, we have so much farther to go. And it's humbling to realize the responsibility we have now to make this show better because of the trust you've put into us and the time you've spent listening to us and kind of the investment you've put into us. So on one hand, I do feel to say thank you, just from the bottom of my heart, deep gratitude. You've allowed me to do some really cool, fun stuff, right? I get to talk about stuff that I really like. And honestly, I don't know that I necessarily deserve or merit being able to do this podcast, but you've let me and allowed me to do this all the same. And on the other hand, I do feel this tremendous weight of responsibility, and I want to fulfill on that responsibility. And I want to tell you that I'm going to do my best. And I do have to be honest, I don't know what the future looks like, right? I don't know come next year where I'll be or where we'll be or where you'll be. But I do want to do my best. And it's because of that weight of responsibility that I'm doing this episode today. I want to share these lessons that I learned to hopefully help you get better and also help you know that your investment in us is paying off. So with all of that sappiness out of the way and who knows what else you think about that, let's get into the most important DMing lessons that I've learned this year. Also, I do realize that I can be a little bit dry. So I'm going to try and be less dry. I'm actually going to take a drink of water to get myself less dry. There's no real way of saying that anyways, drinking water now. All right. So the first and most important lesson that I've learned as a dungeon master this year also applies to podcasting and being a business partner / owner. And that is to let go. This lesson also might be a bit too individualized for myself, but I tend to grab hold of things that are important to me and really not let them go, even after I probably should. I can really, really sympathize with Anakin about not wanting to let go of Padme or his mother, and really doing everything he can to hold on to what's his, and kind of that's what he wants, right? I sympathize with that, although I don't sympathize with killing younglings. And this is a problem because I grab tight of things so hard that I don't really let them grow on their own. And as a dungeon master in my D&D games, this has manifested in sessions that, at least from my perspective, obviously I didn't ask my players every single time, but from my perspective, these sessions seemed too forced. They seemed too stressed, right? And I think deep down, in my case, it stems from this fearful attitude towards life and actually like a scarcity mindset, right? Like this idea that I'm not good enough as a dungeon master. And for you, this might show up as never feeling like you have prepared enough for your sessions and always worrying that you won't know what to do. You might not feel particularly ready for every single session. You might feel roadblocks in your writing, and you'll tend towards trying to railroad your players. Not because you actually think that's going to give them a better experience, but it's because you're afraid of just letting go and seeing where the story takes you, being along for the ride as well as the players, although in a different seat. So to fix this, I would say start practicing to trust yourself. You don't have to have everything perfect, but if you do trust yourself and believe that whatever the party throws at you, you're going to be able to take care of and it's going to be fun, then you'll be able to throw something fun back at them. And you'll see that everything does work out. In a more practical way, prep your next session halfway on purpose. Only prep the first half of the session and then see where the story takes you. And I think you'll be surprised at how capable you are, but not just that, at what your players add to the story. Because remember, it's their story too. And actually, that leads me to number 2. What if questions. I've learned from various podcast interviews that one of the roles of the dungeon master is to be a mad scientist. We're literally supposed to look at the game and the story with a curious eye in addition to our judgmental eye. And for me, the most important questions that I can ask are, what would the party do if? Or what would happen if? This is the best way to drive the story because it's the players that are driving the story and you're simply giving the party the ingredients and then they do all the baking, or half baking, I guess you could say in most cases. And when you don't do this, there isn't any wonder for you, and you risk falling into the trap of telling your players a story rather than letting them discover the story at the table that the table wants to tell. The reason this is an inferior experience is because the game was designed to be a collaborative storytelling experience. It's built that way so that everyone at the table can collaboratively tell a story. If you want to tell a story by yourself, then go write a book, go write a story. But if you want to play D&D, I highly recommend embracing the nature of the collaborative storytelling experience, because every single person as your player has something magnificent to add to your story, which will make your story more magnificent. That's just simply how it works. So embrace that. To do this in practice, between now and your next session, ask yourself, what would the party do if XYZ happened? So in my current campaign, and if any of you in my campaign are listening to this, which I highly doubt, please turn it off. This is a big, big spoiler for the next session. But in the last session, the party was at a memorial service for someone that they didn't particularly know, but it was kind of big for the city. And surprise, surprise, the memorial service was interrupted by some sort of insurgent or something who ended up summoning this ancient red dragon, among other things. And obviously that's whoa, ancient red dragon, that's pretty big. They're level 11, and also I'm still maybe somewhat doubtful that they can actually take down this level 11 dragon, because there's also other stuff in the fight that they're dealing with. So I had this question: how can I make sure that they have a fighting chance against this red dragon, this ancient red dragon? I don't want this red dragon just to fly away and kind of have it be like this, unfulfilled thing. So I thought, who would be an interesting NPC to show up and introduce? I then had a thought: what would happen if the enemies of the party appeared and helped them defeat the adversary, and then asked for a truce with the party so that way all of them could fight a different enemy? What would the party do? How would they react? And for me, this is interesting because I get to look at possibilities that both are interesting. If the party decides to make the truce, then how is that going to impact their party relationships? If the party decides not to do the truce, how is that going to impact them? See, with this in mind, I can imagine different storylines, and I don't need to have everything prepared. But instead, I just need to have the next step. And for me, that next step is very interesting because I asked the question, what if? Number 3 is sizzle it up. This lesson is one I learned from our very own co-host, Caden Notley. Over the summer, Caden took over our private campaign to run a story he'd made, and it was fun and enlightening. Caden's really good at painting minis, and he used to be in a band. Actually, you should check out his music on Spotify. It's under Texture Love. Texture as in like the texture of something you touch, and then love. So TEXTURE space LOV. And Caden DM'd for us, and as he DM'd, he used his high-quality minis, and he actually brought in some voice-changing gear that allowed him to make his voice really deep and demonic and stuff, and both of these tools made the game more fun. Now, as we were going through this, I did something that you should never do, but I compared myself to Caden, right? And I realized that I don't really put any sizzle into my games. And I admire Caden for that, right? He's able to be a showman and kind of give the audience, which is the players, a show. And that's exactly what you want, because that brings the players back. So I realized that that's something I can work on. And to be clear, every DM has their own style, and each game comes with its own set of expectations, and you should certainly live up to those and try and fulfill those. You can, however, add some sizzle to your game. Add things that might impress the party, and add things that take it to the next level. They say don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle, right? Sell the sizzle, not the steak. And because of Caden's inspiration, I've decided to start trying to learn how to paint minis, and I'm working on making excellent music playlists for my games and things like that. I'm just trying to improve where I know I'm not as good. So in practical terms, here's what you can do. Think about what resources you have at your disposal. If you have a room where you can dim the lights, then do that. If you have a 3D printer, then print some stuff with your 3D printer. If you have access to music or ambiance, then use that. Whatever tools you have, use them. Learn how to use them to the best of your ability, because that's going to add some sizzle, and that sizzle is really going to be the stuff that people remember. It's going to allow them to fix those memories deep in their mind. Number 4, lean into your strengths. In my previous lesson, I mentioned that Caden was using his high-quality minis and his technology for his sound technology. Naturally, he understands these two assets because he's good at them. And he used these two assets because he's good at them. And earlier this year, we had a podcast with author Dan Wells, wherein Dan explained that a good DM looks for and understands their particular strengths and leans into them. And that's exactly what Caden did, and that's what I'm working on. For sure, finding your strengths is pretty hard, right? It's not easy because you might have a good day, you might have a bad day, but over time you can see the trends of things that you're good at. It takes trial and error, It takes effort. And I'm slowly learning what I'm a little bit better at and maybe a little bit worse at. For example, I'm not amazing, but I'm a little bit better at puzzles and role-playing than I am at combat, which is kind of sad because combat's a pretty big part of D&D. But the sooner you can learn what you're good at, the better, because you can make those parts of your games shine. So, in practical sense, spend time figuring out what you're good at. Ask your players. And honestly, think about the things that you like to do, that you do basically every session, because that's probably what you're good at. And obviously, this doesn't mean you should forget the stuff you're not good at, but make sure you do use the stuff you're good at to make your players smile and have fun. And actually, that brings me to my last lesson, the very hard lesson that I've had to learn this year, is that you got to have fun. D&D is about having fun. And the reason why I say this is, a hard lesson is because there are ups and downs in everyone's lives. As a podcaster, as a business owner, we've had to make some pretty interesting decisions, and we've had some pretty tough conversations between ourselves, right? Sometimes it's just not fun. And I think this goes back to kind of my first lesson of letting it go. For a lot of stuff that I've worked on, I kind of hold on too tight, and I don't enjoy it. I'm getting better at being able to just have fun, enjoy the moment. This is important because at the end of the day, even if you're a professional dungeon master, you're doing this for a living, you're on Critical Role, if you're not having fun, you're not playing the game. Because that's what it is. It's a game. So in practical terms, look back at the last 6 months of your D&D experience. Was it fun? If not, it's time to do something different or act differently, because there's a better way to play. When you have fun, you're able to give more to the game, and your players get more. You get more, right? If you think of it in terms of an investment, the fun is your return on investment. Why would you do something and not get something out of it? Enjoy the game, because you'll be much better at it. As I said, everything comes to an end, and 2024 is almost over. We still have, less than 30 days before it's over. And after that, a new year's going to start, and that's going to end. And the real question is, as these things end and new things begin, do you find yourself in a better position? Are you a better dungeon master? Funny enough, that's the name of this show. So if you're not being a better dungeon master, my question is, what's holding you back? What are you waiting for to take those steps? Your next session, your next campaign, your first session. What's holding you back from becoming a better dungeon master? And obviously, I love personal development, so what's holding you back from being a better person? But that's beyond the scope of this podcast. This is about how to be a better DM. I shared with you my 5 most important lessons of 2024 about being a dungeon master that I've learned. And I've tried to be a bit vulnerable and kind of open up my heart to you guys so you can see what's going on inside my head. I know it's a dangerous place, so I wouldn't go there without adult supervision. That sounded weird. Anyways, I wouldn't go there without a tour guide. I hope that start of 2025, you are ripping and roaring to get going, being a better DM. That you have all the skills and tools you need to take the game to where you want it to be. And my goal is that you'll look back and truly be able to say, yes, I am a better dungeon master this year. And I'm just glad that you're still listening to us, honestly, and that we were able to be a small part of that journey. As you go and you make your goals and you learn your lessons, feel free to share your successes and your failures with us. We'd love to commiserate with you because we've probably been there. But we'd love to bask in the glory of your successes and see how far you can go, because I've said this once, I'll say it again. The world's best dungeon master, statistically speaking, is probably unknown to the world. So that means one of you could be the world's best dungeon master. And my hope is that it's you. Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thanks for listening to any episode. Thanks for listening to our show and being a sort of friend to me over the airwaves of the internet. We'll be back next time with another handcrafted episode just for you. But until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.